Hello and welcome to Hops and Brews. This week, we are taking a look at the Vermont style IPA, the New England style IPA, the East Coast style IPA, one of the most iconic beers of today.
For an open window on a crappy world, Max and Chris from Ups and Brews. Ups and Brews. Welcome to Ups and Brews.
Before we get started, a quick word for our sponsor. If you were to brew this style of beer, which is not necessarily hard to do, Brew HQ would be the one-stop shop to go to. Not only can you buy the equipment there on the website, you can also buy all the ingredients to brew a beer like this. Phenomenal website, phenomenal company when it comes to home brewing. And in these times, home brewing is pretty awesome. It's pretty fun. I mean, you can make bread, you can make a bunch of different fermented things, but beer is always going to be, one of those things. One of those classic things to be fermenting at home. If you use the code BROS at checkout, you'll get a 10% off the order. So you get to brew beer at a discount and then drink that beer.
All right, so some of you call them New England IPA, Northeast IPA, NE IPA, or Hazy IPA, or Juicy IPA, or Big Juicy Bold IPAs, or whatever you want to call them. They are the new IPA style in town, and that's what everyone's raving about right now. So, we're taking a deep dive for the whole month, a 4-video series on this specific style, which originated on the East Coast where we're located, which is just cool, I guess, and maybe will give us a bit more insight into this fantastic style that features newly breeds of hops that are mostly growing into the Yakima Valley in the US. But brewing a New England IPA is sometimes challenging, even though some brewers may say it's an easy one. Max, how do we brew a New England IPA, and what makes it so special every single time we're drinking one?
Thanks, Chris. So, it's no secret that I am a Pilsner guy. That said, I have brewed this type of beer, and I do enjoy New England-style IPA. I find that lately I've been very specific as to which ones I like and which ones I dislike, and I'm still trying to figure out why. This beer, technically, on paper, is not necessarily complicated. It's actually quite simple. The steps to be able to make a beer like this are quite easy. It's not super hard. What gets hard is to make something really, really good out of it. And it's more of the brewer's skill and knowledge of his own equipment that is going to figure out if the beer is going to turn out good or not. It's not just adding late addition of hops and then hoping for the best. There is some tricky parts to it, but essentially the recipe is pretty straightforward. The reason why this beer got popular, why this beer became a thing, is kind of by accident. So you have a receptive public, you have a bunch of homebrewers who don't necessarily have filters, and you have homebrewers who are doing smaller batches, regular brewers who are doing smaller batches for a more receptive. Fuck. That one was good too. Okay. Thanks, Chris. So, to brew this beer, well, first off, you guys probably know by this point that I'm more of a Pilsner guy, but I do respect this beer, and I do like this beer. It's funny because I've been trying to analyze. There's some that I really like, some that I don't like, brand-wise. And essentially, they're all New England-style IPAs, but I'm still debating. Is it just because someone calls it an IPA, therefore you can do pretty much what you want with it? I mean, IPAs are more of a marketing term at this point than an actual beer style. If you have IPA on something, you're going to make sales. You're going to sell that beer because people want IPAs. So if you put New England style IPA, regardless of if you've actually followed a New England style recipe or not, it's going to sell. And you can kind of fake it. There's ways around this. I mean, I think the difference between a very good New England style IPA, Vermont style IPA, is in the subtlety. It's in knowing your equipment. As a brewer, if you know your equipment, then you know exactly what steps you have to take to get that beer to the next level. So it's relatively easy to make a basic New England style IPA. It's a little harder when you're trying to make, a very, very good one. So the reason why this beer style is a thing today is actually, oh, I've been burping, is actually quite interesting. So a couple things have to happen for this beer to be a thing. A, there has to be, IPA, so mostly American IPA back then. Then you have to have the craft beer revolution. There's got to be craft brewers out there who are making beer and making beer for a receptive public. That's the big part. If you don't have a receptive public, then you're going to still make, beer that sells. You're going to make lagers and whatnot, the macro beers. No, you can make small batches as a brewer, and you can make it to a public that already likes you. Therefore, you get to try a couple different things. This is where late hop addition and dry hopping kind of comes in, where it's a little harder to do on a larger scale. The other thing that kind of you really revolutionizes the access to different styles, different types of yeast. The macro brewers, they tend to have a lager strain and an ale strain. As when you're a craft brewer, you have access to a bunch of different styles, a bunch of different kinds of yeast that are going to have very, very specific particularity to them and brew a beer in a very, unique way. So, receptive public, wanting to try different things, and just hops in general. People were starting to experiment with hops at this point and figuring out that, hey, you don't have to add them early in the boil. You can add them actually like right after and get a lot more flavor from it. So Cascade became a thing, but then Citra became a thing, which was a very, very flavorful hop. Then a bunch of them showed up afterwards. So how do you brew this beer? It's not that hard. You do want a haze in it, and you do want a lot of hop character. So generally your base malt is going to be two-row, and then you're going to add oats and wheat. That's pretty much it. You still want the beer to be on a more lighter side of your SRM. You want something that is going to be more of a kind of straw color. You don't want it to be caramel at all. You want it to look like a fruit juice, basically. So 2 rows, your best option for that. The wheat and the oat are going to add body to your beer. They're going to add a little bit of that foam on top, but especially they're going to add some of that haze. They have a lot of those proteins that are hard to get rid of. And to kind of evolve in that way, a lot of the homebrewers, or not homebrewers, but breweries that were doing this didn't necessarily have filters. So you have haze in a beer because you've used, wheat and oats, and you can't really get it out, so it's going to remain there. Now, pair that with a yeast that doesn't flocculate well. So flocculation with yeast is basically the ability of the yeast to uptake some of those proteins in itself and drop out a solution. So if you have a yeast that doesn't do that easily, then you have to filter it a little more heavily. If you have a brewery that doesn't have a filter, then that beer is going to be hazy. But you have that receptive public that's going to like that. So it kind of works in your favor in that case. So base malt, pretty easy. Flocculating or non-flocculating yeast in this case. So Vermont, it was one of the first ones that was used, and it is a great one for it, but there's others out there. The last thing is hops. You don't want any bitterness. There's no, technically the IBU should be around 0 in a beer like this. It never is. It's closer to 40, but you're not actively adding it in the boil. You're not actively trying to get any IBUs from that hop. You're really only trying to get the flavor from it. So Whirlpool Edition, Flame Off Editions, and dry hopping to get all of those aromas in. That's pretty much it. At that point, you've got your New England style IPA, and drink it fast. Hoppy beers should be consumed like milk. As soon as it's out of the tank, you should pretty much drink it. There's a very, very low shelf life on these beers. All that to say, New England style IPAs, great style of beer. Naturally, as I've mentioned before, I'm more of a Pilsner guy, but they do have a place, and I do enjoy New England style IPAs. Later this month, we're going to debate on should a beer be clear or hazy, and next week, we're going to be looking at one of the iconic ones, and the week after, we're going to be looking at a little more about that yeast. I think that yeast is the key ingredient in this case. Everything has to happen for the yeast to perform properly, but in general, it does. So Chris, what is the importance of this beer? Why is this beer a thing?
So obviously this new style really shook the industry when it first came out about 5 years ago, but we're currently seeing a big boom here locally in Quebec towards this style, mainly because it attracts new drinkers into the industry. Why does it attract so many people, and why is it so different compared to other different styles that popped up over the last decade? To my knowledge and to what I've seen so far in the market is the fact that this beer boasts big, bold, juicy aromas without having this high bitterness level that you get in other beer styles or other IPAs. And also the mouthfeel created through this beer makes it creamy, completely different from other styles out there, which is fairly unique, but again, also a lot more approachable for people that are not used to beer in general and that maybe are more keen towards cocktails or drinks, usually brewed with juice or whatever. This beer has all what you need into the juicy flavors, aromas you're looking for, and it's also a beer. So new beer drinkers coming into the industry, yes, they've faced over the last years, last decade, West Coast IPAs, stouts, and it's all scary beers when you're not used to have a beer palate or you're used to drink lagers and get those roasty aromas or the bitterness present in there or dryness. Even I have friends that are really not fans of phenols when you get the banana aromas and other kind of like spice tones into a beer. That's where New England IPAs really will change the world and will become, I think, a style that will be the classic and that will affect the industry for the upcoming years once again. So right now, most breweries are brewing a Vermont IPA, New England IPA, whatever you want to call them, and it's pretty much easily available all across the board. But having these beers so popular really brings some challenges and maybe some bad parts to the style or beers in general. The first one would be availability of juicy hops. Yes, those hops are very famous and everyone's looking after them. But the effect on that is that yes, it's currently growing in the Yakima Valley, some in New Zealand, Australia, but they are also all trademarked hops. Being trademarked makes it a little bit more harder to find and also harder for smaller breweries to get their hands on. Most smaller breweries start off by buying older crops of these hops. You won't see a small brewery getting the freshest of them all right off the bat because usually you need to sign off contract with those producers. And last time I spoke with one hop rep, that's what he told me. He's currently signing off breweries for 2 years in the future. It's kind of crazy when you think about it because 2 years in the future, at the pace that the industry is growing, the quantities just doesn't really add up because you grow up so fast that you can't really predict what's going to be needed for your future brews and for your future recipes at the same time because palates are changing and trends are changing at the same time, which is a bit crazy. Vermont IPAs need to stay fresh. That's another challenge. And being out there with so many variations, many offerings from other breweries, makes it harder to keep your product fresh on the shelves so you can sell fast and drink fast and keep it fresh all the time. So the consumer gets the best experience when they crack up a can. It's the challenge every breweries are facing right now. My third point is the price. Usually when you add more hops into a beer, which is already a very expensive ingredient, you'll crank up the price a little bit more higher into those beers. And if you don't properly tell your consumers or just educate your customers about the prices of ingredients in your beer, you'll find people really angry that they're paying twice the amount that they pay on a great lager that they're already drinking, and for them it's just, why are you hyping this up and making it a bit more expensive? Another good challenge. And my last point is hype. Yes, this beer style is so hyped up that if you have a brewery that you really do enjoy and you enjoy the beers that they're doing, you might have issues finding those said beers when they release it because it just goes out sold out in a blink of an eye. And when I say blink of an eye, I've heard stories of a full beer release being sold out in less than 6 minutes. All that online, obviously, but still, it's something that is scary when you think about it. And if you get attached to a brewery and the products that they're making, keep an eye out, try different ones. Maybe you'd like something that's a little bit less hyped up, but also a bit more readily available. That's up to you. If you want to jump on the hype train and get your fresh cans of Vermont Hazy IPAs, then you're free to go. You're free to do it. I think it's a cool thing for the industry. It brings up a lot of hype from media outside of what beer is in general, and I think that it's a great effect on the industry. It's good for the economy, it's good for the breweries themselves and the staff that they're hiring. So, and obviously once we can all go out and have fun, we'll be better for tourism at the same time.
Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share. We'll see you guys in the next one. And stay tuned. Next week, we're taking a look at Eddie Topper.